Order. We'll begin with the pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jess, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Varga.
Here.
Mr. Cicero. Excused. Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Perkovic. Absent. Mr. Sidoti.
Here.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Mr. Snow.
Here. Tonight, we're going to, before the meeting actually gets underway, we're going to present some design awards to some guys who did a terrific job in developing an area of the city. So with that in mind, let's take care of that business.
Okay. So as our chairman has indicated, we are pleased to bring back the design awards. The Planning Commission has given out awards over the years for commercial and industrial projects that they determine to have exceptional quality in building design and are reflective of the city's desired community character. This year, the Planning Commission reviewed projects approved in 2017 and 18 and broke them up based on the following categories. New commercial buildings under 50,000 square feet, new commercial buildings over 50,000 square feet, re-imaged buildings, new industrial buildings, and best landscape design. The winners have been chosen, and we'd like to recognize both the owners and the architects of each project. So when your company is called, if you would please come up to the podium area where our chairman, Mr. Snow, will greet you, and then we will present the plaques to both recipients. So let's get going.
With that in mind, we'll begin tonight with best commercial building under 50,000 square feet, presented to Werner, Sander, and Dietrich, or Werner, Sander, and Dietrich. Just in the nick of time.
Yeah, way to show up on time.
Yes.
So the owner of this project, which the building is known as Lighthouse Advisors. If you aren't familiar with it, it's located at 8450 Menor Avenue. The owner, Brunner, Sand and Dietrich, and the architect, Emmy Osborne Companies. The Planning Commission approved this project in January of 2017.
Present it out here by the
I
microphone.
can do whatever you
Put it
want.
right out there.
So we should clap hands. I get the policy.
Okay, now we've got the best commercial building over 50,000 square feet, presented to Myers Grocery. That applicant here.
Myers is located at 9200 Menor Avenue. The owner is Myers Stores Limited Partnership, and the architect, Bergman Architects, Engineers, and Planners. The Planning Commission approved this project in October of 2017.
You got it? Sure.
Okay.
It says it's. Yeah, but he's standing back there. It says it's. Put it here. Close reference property, yeah. And B table.
Now, this one's for the best 2019 Design Award for the best re-imaged building, presented to Orthodontics by Dr. Ken Lawrence. Is he here? There he is. Okay.
So this building is
Got this bad
located,
tooth.
this building is located at 8857 Menor Avenue. The owner is Orthodontics by Dr. Ken Lawrence, and the architect is Harmony Designs. Harmony Designs, I'm sorry.
This got his priorities straight. I wouldn't have come, you'd have 4 people.
Best Industrial Design Building, Highland Electronics.
Highland Electronics is located at 6240 Tin Man Road. The owner is Highland Electronics, and the architect is M.E. Osborne Companies. This project was approved in May of 2017.
Cleaning up?
That's a nice building, right?
Thank you.
You're in the background. I know. I'm starting to get
You want the plan? You want the plaque? You didn't know you were going to be Vanna White tonight, did you? The 2019 Design Award for Best Landscape Design presented to Highland Electronics. Did you guys do that?
Same owner and architect is also M.E. Osborne Companies. This project, again, was approved in May of 2017.
Thanks, Vanna.
I just want to say a special thanks again and congratulations to all of our recipients. Thank you for making City of Mentor look better.
Just as a point of information, we thought it was best to recognize these individuals for the fine work they do in this city, making it truly better in Mentor. So, with that in mind, now we'll go to the regular meeting and I'll entertain a motion for the approval. It's the minutes of the October 24th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Just when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Now the special meeting of November 7th.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. We have one public hearing this evening, conditional use permit to allow automobile repair shop at 8330 Station Street. Is that applicant here? Would you come forward and identify yourself for the clerk, please? And give us a little overview of what you'd like to do with that location.
Name's Tom Kravasik for Lake Auto Service. And I'm actually downsizing and moving over there, mainly to store the tow trucks and some cars inside, do light maintenance. I'm moving to that complex there because Powerline does all my repair and they're in the same building.
Makes sense to go there.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Is there anyone wishing to speak against? Okay, we'll close the public portion. I have a question for you. Whenever I drive down Station Street, I see an upside-down car there. Who's that car belong to?
That's the city.
I guess I should have known the answer to that before I asked the question, huh?
The city puts them there for the fire department to do work on, like practice cutting them out.
I noticed in the staff report that there are many things that are in violation of the CUP, which was originally given to that location. Are you familiar with that? I know it's incidental to what your application is, but nonetheless, it's important for us to maintain the integrity of the properties.
That's, as far as I know, that's nothing to do with the people that are renting there. That was to do with, I don't know if the other stuff there, if they're talking about all the stones and bricks, if that was city too.
Kath, you mentioned in the staff report, Kathy, that there's some problems with the locations in violation of the CUPs.
Yeah, so our concern was in moving forward with this particular tenant within the third tenant space on site. Well, number one, where were the cars that this applicant was going to be storing? Where were they going to be placed? And where were they going to be placed in lieu of the number of cars that are already on site? And we have a number of cars that are in violation, primarily unlicensed vehicles or junk dismantled vehicles or parts that are stored on the property. And it was, our recommendation, as part of this review, that we get the entire property in order before, again, proceeding with another outdoor storage use that obviously has an impact on the other tenants.
So,
I plan on storing my cars inside.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti.
But the point that Ms. Mitchell's making is that with all the outstanding existing violations down there now associated with the previous two CUPs that we granted, for us to entertain a third CUP, we just can't do that until all those violations are corrected. So you need to get with the property owner and tell them that in order for the planning commission to entertain your CUP, they've got to correct all those violations to the satisfaction of the city. And once we're satisfied, if you can do that prior to our next meeting, which is when, Kathy? December 9th?
December 9th.
If you can do that prior to December 9th, and they can take a quick look at it and they're satisfied with it, then we'll be more than happy to entertain the CUP.
And the people you're having this problem with is the power line engines then, I'm assuming?
Whatever
Owner of the
two
property, which do you
The owner of the property.
owner of the
own of the
property.
property?
They happen to be tenants down there, but the owner of the property is. All right?
So with that in mind, I'll entertain a motion to table this for the next 3 weeks.
Motion to table item number 1 on tonight's agenda, pending resolution of the outstanding violations.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Could I get a copy of that so I could tell them exactly, or do they
Sure.
know exactly?
You should have a copy of the staff report. It's in the staff report. If you don't have a copy of that, we'll get you a copy of that. Under old business, rezoning of 8.126 acres from R2 Single Family to RVG Village Green. Is that applicant here? I see he is, so I'll entertain a motion to take it off the table.
So moved. Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Greg Summers, Summers Real Estate Group. I'm back to continue our discussion. Since the last meeting where we discussed this, I've met with the city, I've met with the neighbors. We put forth significant effort to come up with a plan that would, I guess, meet in the middle between concerns of the city, concerns of the neighbors. The original concern was that it was in excess of the cul-de-sac length requirement. We now have a plan that meets the cul-de-sac length requirement, and there was also some concerns about what we would do in the green space. We're going to commit to doing a very nice pavilion with a fireplace. We're okay with all the other conditions that were suggested on the report, and we feel that this is the best plan. Like I said, the plan meets the code, provides better safety for the new residents, better safety for the existing residents to eliminate through traffic there. And like I said, we are under the cul-de-sac length. We meet the street length requirement. We're well under what fire code is for requiring a second means of ingress and egress. And we would respectfully request that this plan would be approved.
Okay.
And I know that, I'm not sure how it works on the table, but I know that a couple of neighbors had a few more comments. I don't know if that's allowed or if that's,
It's not a public hearing. We've already had the public hearing for this.
Okay.
So, no.
okay. That was asked, so.
Okay. Kathy, any comments relative to the second ingress egress?
Well, we certainly recognize that it does meet the cul-de-sac length that is stipulated in the code. The administration feels from a safety standpoint, it would still be more ideal to have 2 points of access. It's always better to have 2 points of access. It was intended to be that way, the way the Brooks Boulevard extension was designed, Rice Drive was designed. And that's what's also stipulated in the code. So that is the administration's recommendation.
That's your recommendation, but he's not required to do that. Is that correct? Because of the number of units?
Well, I'm gonna speak to
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, well, he's certainly meeting the cul-de-sac length requirement, and that is, that section of the code was changed some years ago to provide an enhanced level of safety, because as we've seen in the city, we have a lot of long cul-de-sacs, single way in and out. But from a planning perspective, we still feel it's important, and the code does reflect the desire to see residential neighborhoods in particular connected, so that we have multiple ways in and out for service provision, whether that's safety services or other. So you're always going to, wherever there is an opportunity for interconnectivity, and as Ms. Mitchell pointed out, that Rice Drive extension exists specifically for that purpose. That's why it was platted. Is this better? Absolutely, than the last revision that you saw. But the administration would still prefer that connectivity, and that's reflected in the staff report. And I think you'll find that both the police and fire chiefs agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make a few other
Go right
comments.
ahead.
I was told that, that was actually for bus traffic. And part of the reason why we put forth such effort in trying to find a middle-of-the-road solution, and I know that neighbor comments are really important in Mentor. There's 120 people on a list and a petition that are against that connecting. There's not sidewalks on Brooks. There's going to be traffic going through there. That right away on Brooks is literally like by their front door. I mean, it's not ideal, and that's why we went back. We also talked with the city. We don't like to go against the grain here, but again, it meets the code and it meets the neighbors' concerns, and we think it's the best approach here.
Okay. I've driven through there, and I know your concerns, because there are two very mature trees on each side of that driveway that probably would have to come out, I'm guessing.
And the right-of-way goes up, literally up to a couple of the neighbors, I mean, like a few feet from their front door, their garage. I mean, I've met with the neighbors on a bunch of occasions, and they were really upset and really concerned about it. And that's why, like I said, we're not trying to go against any recommendations, but we wanted to design a plan that met the code, made the residents happy, and we thought would be actually safer to have the cul-de-sac for the new residents, and safer to not have cars flying through there with the neighbors. So we genuinely took the time and effort to try to come up with the best case scenario here. So that was our goal.
Any additional comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti?
Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell.
Yes.
That stub of Rice Drive that dead ends into the school property, that's a public dedicated right-of-way, correct?
Yes.
All right, but it does not meet the standards of our streets. Is that correct?
It's a 50-foot right-of-way.
Is
The
that
current-
I didn't get out and measure it yesterday, but that's 50 foot?
Yeah, our current standard is 60.
Seemed awful small. And there are no curbs, like he said. If you were to survey that right-of-way, do you think there's
I'm not
additional?
talking about pavement, I'm talking about right-of-way.
Right.
So just to clarify for everybody, right-of-way goes beyond the pavement.
Right.
There's area on both sides of the pavement that is inclusive of the right-of-way.
That was leading to my next question. If you were to go out there and survey that by an independent surveyor, there's obviously has to be more right-of-way than there is pavement.
Correct.
And that would have to be all,
That would have to be modified. Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Varga?
how wide is the existing pavement? I mean, it doesn't meet a two-directional street, two-lane street.
Barely.
How wide is the pavement that's there now?
It's like 16 feet wide, I believe. It's very skinny.
Which would at best be a single lane of traffic, right?
So the challenge is that right-of-way goes literally up to a few feet from, I know it's right-of-way, but I'm just saying, after meeting with the neighbors, it goes a couple feet from their door. I mean, it would not be ideal to improve that street up to, I mean, it would be.
No, I understand. I mean, I'm just trying to, from a fact point of view, trying to figure out, that couldn't be a two-directional street the way it is now. So the most it could be is one-directional, which would make it a single, one-way access into the cul-de-sac, I guess. I'm still not sure that provides a lot of benefit. The street's going to remain, correct?
Mm-hmm.
There's no plans to alter it. My only thing I'm trying to address in the back of my head is the fire and police concerns, the safety concerns. I'm trying to, try to mitigate all the other issues that are around it and just deal with, in my point of view, deal with the fire and police. If the street was left exactly the way it was, and there was a drivable point from the cul-de-sac to that gate, and put a gate or some kind of control point, so that the fire or the police could use it, but no one else could use it, and you basically stick with this design, is that, and I'll address it both to you and the applicant and to the city, is that a viable way of trying to address the safety concerns of the police and the fire department? A non-public drive that would be maintained, the access would be controlled? I know we did a subdivision last year where we had one of those Knox boxes and a gate, for the fire department and the police to use. If we kept this design the way it is now, but still allowed the police to be able to come in or go out that way, the fire department, would that? I understand this resolves a lot of the conflict with the neighbors. I'm trying to deal with the fire and the police department.
The administration is not in support of a gate and Knox box. We've spoken with police and fire about that. It's not the desired option
In lieu of
at all.
no access? I mean, that's all I'm just trying to talk it through. They would prefer it not to have it at all, or to have a controlled access point?
I'm not sure that, again, without seeing what would be proposed on that and having that discussion, I mean, the police wouldn't likely use it, very, very frankly. The fire department probably would use it if they had to get in an emergency. But keep in mind as well, it isn't just police and fire access that we're talking about. Interconnectivity is simply desirable.
I understand.
So, when we talk about traffic within the neighborhood area, recognizing that some people prefer that their neighborhoods be cut off. From a planning standpoint, the idea try to pursue always is to provide connectivity.
Well, how would?
Having said that,
Yeah.
as I said earlier, this is a much, much preferable plan than what was brought earlier because of the length of that cul-de-sac.
How would the Rice Drive as it exists now provide us with interconnectivity, because it's not a sufficient roadway?
It would have to be brought to
Well, it would be
standards.
improved.
You'd have to improve.
So
it.
so though the right-of-way is deficient, we'd actually create the pavement to be, what, 22 feet? Is that the minimum with curbs?
Yes, well,
I mean, that's being implied. If there is a connectivity, it would have to be 22 feet wide plus curbs, right?
it would have to be,
And
yes.
whose responsibility for that would that fall on, to
Always
develop
falls
that?
Usually the developer.
Like I mentioned before,
Yeah, no, yeah.
it would be a disaster for those existing residents there. I've been out there. I've met them a dozen times. I'm genuinely telling you guys. I mean, I know that's right away, but they've been there for decades, and literally it would be 2 feet off their front door, and it would be a disaster. I couldn't even tell you how many meetings we've had, and that's why I try to come tonight with a solution that would make the residents happy, that met the code. I'm trying hard to.
I know you are. I'm just trying to investigate this.
No, I hear.
This
I'm just trying to
issue,
give you the
you know.
background and.
So let me ask this question to the administration. How do you reconcile the fact that less than 30 lots does not require a separate connection?
How do you reconcile it?
I mean, we're going back and forth on, do we need a second access point? Don't we need a second access point? The state code, which we rely heavily on, says for less than 30 lots, you don't need it. Is that
So-
right?
So what, again, constructing this cul-de-sac at 600 feet and approving this would not be wrong, in our opinion, okay?
Okay,
It's preferred, the preferred option would be the interconnection.
okay.
It complies, the 600 feet complies with the code. It's a much safer alternative than what was presented earlier. And it certainly is far better than many subdivisions that we have that have cul-de-sac lengths 3 and 4 times this. So
So we could feel-
it's not a bad plan. I don't want you to.
We could
get-
feel comfortable with going ahead with the plan as it sits.
We are the city of cul-de-sacs, and I think we can manage this one as well. One thing I would point out, and it is included in the staff report, it's a lot easier to provide services like plowing when you have these connectors, because you can plow straight on. In this case, if you do approve this as presented, we would request that the removal of the grassy area, because it does cut down on the radius, and it make it a lot more difficult to manage that from a snow standpoint. Plus, it's been our experience, and I know the commission has commented on this for decades, that a lot of those island cul-de-sacs don't get maintained over time.
I'm sure the homeowners association would be happy to, no, I'm kidding.
I'm sure they would for the first few years.
We're completely fine with removing that. We're
Okay.
with all the conditions, basically everything else that's being suggested. Well,
I have a different question, a different topic here. The detention basin. Everyone keeps showing it with a nice blue color, but basically it's empty most of the time, right?
yeah, the plan for the detention, and then we did continue to show it on the plan, is to explore the option of just sharing the detention with the existing city-owned detention, subject to engineering approval. And then,
And not building this?
correct, that's,
Oh, that would be,
and then what we'd do in the back there, we'd have a really nice big green area. We'd, make the amenities subject to an approved landscape plan with a pavilion, fireplace, trails, and you wouldn't have some random dry basin there. I think it'd be a lot nicer, and I think there's plenty of capacity, but it's obviously subject to stormwater and engineering. But that's the plan moving forward.
all right. Let me ask you this question, because this is where my interest first came, and that was, this is kind of an amoeba-shaped, anonymous shape, right? It's kind of round at the ends and squished in the middle. Is that shape of any engineering importance, or could this be shaped so that the space where this a pavilion is further away from the houses?
Definitely. That's just a picture, no engineering significance at all, just showing some blue and a potential location for the pond. So we could get it way back there, closer to where, the rear property line.
I'm saying shifting it, if this was, rather than a square basin, like an L-shaped basin, where you'd create a larger area to the east, where this pavilion could be closer to the walk coming from the parking area, and as far away from lot 13 as you could,
Completely agree.
So I would make that a condition, but if you can eliminate the whole feature, that would be great too. And then-
I totally agree, and it'd be really nice to have a private area away from the existing new houses, and we'll definitely do that in the landscape plan.
So I would want to make that a condition, that would be reconfigured so that you'd have a larger recreational space with the pavilion and not directly behind the houses.
No problem, I totally agree.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Cox, we got one question over here. Mr. Cook.
What's the path material?
Typically matting and crushed gravel, but we're working with some new landscape architects that have some more innovative solutions that are better for long-term maintenance, that are various types of packed gravel with matting, so they don't, require long-term maintenance or crack like asphalt. So I would incorporate that into the landscape plan, something that would be a nice, viable, long-term option that's feasible with long-term maintenance.
And include a path connection to the pavilion,
Yes,
wherever it winds up?
Definitely.
There's mature trees on the east and west. Are those staying?
Any towards the rear?
No, right down the property lines.
I mean, we're gonna clear as little as possible. So, I think a lot of them can stay. Even talked to some neighbors about that. But yeah, a majority of them are. We're gonna clear as little as possible.
Okay.
So,
And I appreciate your willingness to work with the neighboring residents by eliminating the connection to Brooks Boulevard. I like this design. Out of all that we've seen, I like this one the best.
I appreciate it.
And I'm in favor of this rezoning to RVG because it's not conducive to develop it under the current R2 zoning. This proposal has compatible land use and density to the bordering neighborhoods.
Is that a motion?
Oh, wait,
Go ahead, Mr. Sidoti.
you done, Brian?
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you.
How close are you in your discussions to utilize the detention basin to the south? I mean, you're saying you're in discussions, you're trying to work it out where you can utilize that and you don't have to do this pond. Where are you in those discussions? How close are you?
I mean, we still had to disagree on the plan, and, you know, we've been through several variations. We had some preliminary discussions about capacity, and it looks like it's definitely going to be a viable option, but as you know, stormwater is complicated. We have to do all, you know, we did do soils, test holes. We're going to have Polaris do a thorough stormwater analysis, work with city engineering and get all that done and work through it, but I think it's going to be viable,
So you're going to do that? That's what you're going to pursue?
Yes.
To see if you can make that work?
definitely,
All right.
definitely.
Your cul-de-sac, is this going to be a public dedicated roadway or a private?
Public.
Didn't you say that this cul-de-sac doesn't meet the standards of our public roadway?
Yeah, we had some concerns with regard to, well, because it's not an engineered drawing, so what's just part of the issue. So we've indicated in condition 5, some of the stipulations that included a minimum 7-foot tree lawn
Right.
and a 5-foot sidewalk shall be provided on both sides of the street, in addition to the island being removed within the cul-de-sac. And then also that the sidewalk shall remain within the proposed right-of-way. So we wanted to see an updated plan with that revision.
We would commit to all that. The tough thing is we submitted engineered drawings and then totally had to go back to the drawing board. So I wanted to make sure before we had Polaris Engineering redo all the engineering, but we'll commit to all those conditions.
So for the record, you will commit to those
100%.
conditions? Okay. The space in the beginning here, in the front of your subdivision, that you had called open space, let's not call that open space. These little sections on both sides of your new roadway, that should be landscaped as your entrance into your subdivision.
Agreed.
Similar to Whalers Cove or a lot of the other subdivisions. You put your sign in there, you mound it, you do some landscaping, so at least you have an attractive entrance to your brand-new subdivision.
Agree.
Okay. And you're not going to have any problems maintaining the 25-foot distance in the rears, so patios and decks and other things?
No, the color coded, we actually took house plans that are viable to build here and we did house fitment on this to make sure. So we didn't just throw a plan together and hope that houses would fit. We did house fitment to make sure all the setbacks would work.
Good, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Zeman, this goes along from us to council, is that correct?
That's correct, and there'll be a subsequent public hearing conducted by the city council as well. So I do have one item.
Go ahead.
In terms of further condition, as the commission's aware, you know, these RVG open spaces on a long enough timeline have become problematic for us. Very often they become abandoned simply through disinterest of the unit owners over time. So I don't have anything specific. I would recommend a condition that the applicant work with the law department. We've got some ideas as to how to make sure that the purpose and intent of that open space is kept in perpetuity, so that we don't see that sort of disconnect between people who own the houses and this other entity which may not be viable, which owns the open space. So not going to redesign the plan, not going to try to necessarily say who should own what, but we do want to make sure that their association documents do provide for the perpetual care and maintenance of the open space.
Okay,
We're glad to do that, to work with the law department on that.
okay. You're very agreeable tonight.
I'm just trying to make everybody happy.
I know. So, yes.
One other item, if you do plan on moving forward with any approvals tonight, then I would ask that you modify item 5, the last sentence that indicates a plan showing conformance with these requirements shall be submitted as part of final plat submission.
Okay.
We're not going to see this again, right?
Unless you want to.
Well,
We have to bring it back for site plan approval, though,
Well,
don't we?
for final site plan
right,
approval,
we will
correct.
see this again relative to some of the comments that we're making. Right. Okay, so,
right.
yes, so ultimately, this is just the zoning change we'll still see a final site plan for approval.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that a motion?
Sure. It's a motion to approve with, and I just want to make sure, we have 9 existing. Did we create any new ones?
Law director.
The law director's
Comments?
comments as a condition, and I'd like to make the reconfiguration or removal of the detention facility as a condition.
No problem.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3, miscellaneous review of a transfer of a CUP at 8840 Tyler Boulevard. I see that applicant's here, so I'll entertain a motion to take it off the table.
So, yeah.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Yes, good evening. My name is Vicki Johnson. I'm here tonight representing the applicant for the transfer of the CUP. The applicant is ARG D151 ECK 001 LLC.
That was a
Raising the-
mouthful, huh?
Had to read it.
I'll ask the administration, any comments, questions that you have relative to this? It's pure and simple, just to transfer the CUP.
Correct.
Any problems on the existing conditions?
No.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Thank you.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Architecture review, reimaging of a commercial building at 7215 Center Street. Is that applicant here? Yes. Would you come and identify yourself for the clerk, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Mark Horton. I own Horton Properties.
Okay. So give us a little overview of what you want to do there, or what you've already done there, and how we're going to rectify that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first say publicly, I am personally and professionally embarrassed to be in front of you this evening on this matter. My wife grew up at Garfield Park. We were married at St. Mary's Church. We've lived, worked, and played in this community. Our kids went through the schools. I coached them. I mean, we love Mentor. And the last thing that I would want to do is sully my family's reputation over an oversight. And so the building, when we purchased it 20 years ago, it is the only commercial real estate we own. And it has many construction defects in it. I'm an engineer. I'm a structural engineer. I work at a firm here. I'm on the board of advisors of a national forensic engineering company, so I understand what the problems are. And primarily, there's no flashing and no weep holes in this building. So this building has not been allowed to drain. And we saw mold in it in 2014 when there was a fire caused by First Energy's transformer explosion in the rear of the building. We got that fixed. We monitored it. We scanned it. We've continued to measure humidity levels. And after the heavy record rains in late spring, we determined that the best way to solve this problem was to encapsulate the building with a 3-part coating system. This coating system had to be sequenced carefully because of its weather conditions, and we were able to do that in September. I checked with the building department, and I asked them if I needed a permit to recoat the building, and they said as long as you painted it to its original color, you did not have to get a permit. I asked my painter, and he's painted many buildings. He said you don't need a permit. I asked long-term relationships at Mentor Lumber and former Aga Gas, what color do they recall it being? They said they recall it being a reddish tint. And so that's what I painted the building. I painted the building to match what I termed to be Mentor Lumber brick red. And what I'm here tonight to do is, again, I'm remorseful. I'm embarrassed, but what I'm proposing to do is cap the building with a architectural cornice. I've presented to the planning department some options. I've got some other imagery here. If I would be permitted to show it, but I'm going to pause to see if you have any questions.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
Go ahead.
I think there's a lot of information here, but I think it comes down to just a simple thing. And it's this image. And that is that people would, and there's another one that shows this building and the building next to it being originally almost the same appearance. I don't know if you got a slide for that. Yeah, there's that. I mean, that's the difference between what it looked like and how you painted it.
No,
Right.
sir, I don't agree with that. I
You don't
don't.
agree that this was the original appearance of the building? And that's what you painted it?
Well, that is not the original appearance of the building. This building is over 30 years old, and it has gone through a tremendous amount of water infiltration that has washed out the brick pigmentation. I'm not familiar with what picture that is. The building, the building next to us is a different brick. The building that was Aga Gas, there was, matched up.
Well, that shows it a little bit.
There,
That
there,
color
there,
and
that's-
that. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
that's-
they're similar slightly earth-toned brick colors, that's all.
Well, I will.
And brick doesn't change color. It's stone, it's material. It doesn't bleach or anything unless you do something to it. It wasn't painted before, was it?
I respectfully disagree with you, sir. Brick does change colors, especially if it doesn't.
Okay, not
if it
let's
wasn't
just say
built to-
significantly.
If it wasn't, yes, if it wasn't built to the construction standards and it's not allowed to drain, it will wash out and it will fade. And that's what this building did. The last 5 years, its appearance declined considerably. And
But the significant appearance of the building hadn't changed. It was still a certain hue of masonry that it all wasn't washed out. It all wasn't, I mean, masonry doesn't do that.
Again, to be as respectful as possible, the last 5 years, it's been an embarrassment to own this building. That's the
Okay.
decline in
I
appearance
understand.
that it took, and it took that because it did not have the proper wall components.
I'm not arguing that point. All I'm concerned about is its appearance, okay? And that, the image he had up there before, which is this image, shows the difference in the appearance where it was painted and where it was not painted. And that's, I think, the biggest issue, is that it looks much different, much different. Granted, the brick may have changed color slightly, but it was still a natural appearance. It is no longer a natural appearance. That's the point I'm trying to get at. So, and I understand all the work you've done, and I've read the report, and I feel bad for you having done all this. Is it possible to put another finish coat on it to bring it back to the approximate hue of where the color was before? So it's not such a distinct contrast with the building next to it and the general environment, or the expectation of an earth tone brick and not a red schoolhouse.
Certainly that's possible. It would not be my preference, and I would like to have the opportunity to propose what I'm trying to do to reconcile this issue, to try to celebrate the old village architecture that exists there today, and then that I'm trying to conform to blend in and not stand out. If you were to go down the street to where the Cleveland Clinic was in my building and where they are now, you would see another building that is declining, and it's declining quickly. And that is what my building looked like and needed to be repaired. I do believe that I restored it to its original appearance. And because of that, I don't believe I'm in violation. I did not realize that there it would be viewed as a re-imaging project.
So your opinion is that the red color that you painted it is the original color of the brick?
I tried my best, based on the information that I gathered. I tried my best. Now, I answered your question, sir, and said that it is possible to recoat, but we've got a major infiltration problem, and what I would not want to be asked to do is to do anything with the grout. I've painted it now. If
No, it's painted. I understand that. It's hard to go back from having it painted. I understand that.
May I show some of these images?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So here is the, in the bottom, there's the before, and here's the above with the cornice that I'm proposing. These are the buildings that we're trying to celebrate that are in the old village core. The one at the top is Consumer Tire, which happens to be right across the street from the Lighthouse Advisors Building that was given an award tonight. This building at the bottom is on Center Street. It is actually owned by a digital imaging company. Their business is imaging. And so what we're trying to do with the elevation at the top, you can appreciate that. And I think that what you can also do, at least if you look down at the bottom, you can start to see that reddish tint, which is what the building had before. Now, if it were to be that you wanted to go back to a gold tone, I just would want to have time to study that more. And I'm sorry my architect wasn't here tonight because he wasn't feeling well. But again, what we're hoping that you'll do is consider these images and where we would like to take this building as opposed to where it's been.
Let me ask this question to the administration. Would we have approved this as it stands? I don't think so. With the painting of the brick, we wouldn't have approved that.
I guess you can better answer that as in terms of your time on the board.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can say this, that if any brick building that was approved through this commission that was painted would be considered a reimage and subject to your reconsideration.
Right. So,
Whatever color they painted it.
So, to answer Mr. Varga's question, could you do something different?
I could certainly do something different. I can come back with some other studies if you would want to give me time to do that. I would.
Let me ask this question to the law department. This has been subject to a court settlement, correct? Is that what I read in the packet? We gave them X amount of time to solve this problem.
Oh.
And they haven't solved the problem, right?
Code enforcement, yes,
enforcement.
they were cited.
Okay,
But they were cited to bring this to you because it had not gone through the proper process.
understand,
So they have complied with that aspect of it.
understand.
We're not part of any other issue that I think you're referring to, sir.
Okay. I just want to get this done
Yes, I
and get it done
understand.
nicely.
And I want you to know that I have communicated with the chief building official. I've told him in writing everything that I thought I needed to address his concerns, and he did confirm that all of his concerns have been taken care of. When I did come in and meet with Kathy and her staff, I was transparent. It was a tense meeting, a meeting that I wish I didn't have to have. And just like I'm expressing remorse here, I just didn't realize that what I did would be considered re-imaging. I contacted the building department, and what my violation is under Chapter 1133 is under the site development plan, and .02 I believe says that if there is a change in exterior elements, that a site plan needs to be submitted. Now, that was after the fact, and I just didn't know. I've said that enough, I think. I
Okay.
didn't realize it.
So let me ask this. Can you fix the problem, as Mr. Vargas cited here tonight?
I would, I'm obviously happy to cooperate. I just need to know what the fix specifically is, so I do it one time. And if that means paint it to the general color back to where it is and not put a cornice on it and leave it looking like a flat roof in the middle of an old village, I'll do it. But I
Well,
don't,
just to speak to that, whether you put the cornice on or not, that's up to you. I don't think we're trying to dictate that. It's just the color that was used is so far removed from the tone and the kind of color that there was there before. And again, I just used this one picture that shows the differential between the way it looked and the way it looks now, or, you know, where the painting is, that you try to do something that is much closer to a natural brick color. And rather than, you know, I
understand.
nobody wants you to have to take all the paint off and try to get it, that's way more than I think anyone could expect. But just to choose a color that would be more sympathetic to the original brick color.
more to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and, you know, you can pick any color you want near that. If you feel that's dirty, you can get the cleaner look, but something that, this is a light tan with maybe a little yellow in it, and the red is just a completely different decision, and something that matches the existing color, or the existing brick.
Do you feel comfortable working with the applicant in that direction?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the administration will work with you on the color. And so why don't we table that? We'll revisit it at subsequent meeting.
And no, I'm just asking, will there be an attempt to try to sandblast the building? Because that was actually brought up in the first meeting. It was pretty tense.
My motion or condition to this would not be to sandblast it. That ruins the brick anyhow to do
I'm
that.
so happy to hear that.
That's
I've
my-
had sleepless nights ever since that meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
That ruins the brick.
Yes.
When I went to look at the property, I thought it was going to stick right out, but it kind of looks like Center Street School. For me, it doesn't, I don't mind the color. I don't think the picture does it justice. As you drive down Center, I couldn't really pick it out. I had to come back again. And then when I looked at it, I thought it looked like Center Street School. So for me, the color, I don't have a problem with it.
I think the point here is the fact that he didn't come to us with a plan for re-imaging the building. I think that's the problem.
I understand, and I think that's well put.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would just chime in, you know, from the administration standpoint, it's difficult. It places everybody in a difficult situation. I think Mr. Horton made an honest mistake here, but it also sets a difficult precedent for us, and I know that we never like to look at approvals after the fact for a lot of different reasons. If the commission is inclined to consider either accepting the existing color or altering that in some manner, just from my point of view, I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to look at some of the other enhancements that he's proposing. I think a cornice would look real nice on that building.
Well, I've caused enough trouble here. I really, I said, I'm embarrassed to be here in front of you. And so I appreciate you being so flexible.
So you'll do the cornice?
I'll work with Kathy to see if we can get the color the way that you like it.
Okay. So you'll do the cornice?
I don't know. I'm budget constrained. That building, I've had it for 20 years and it's sat vacant for 7, but I will do what I can to be proud of this building again.
Okay. And you'll work with the applicant?
Yes.
Yes.
And table it?
Yeah, I think we should table it.
Table it until we get it.
Till we get some definitive
Yeah, right.
answers.
Right, so I move that we table.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. We're not trying to be stinkers here, but
Quite the opposite. You've been very helpful this evening, and I want to thank you again.
you're welcome. Number 5 is tabled, is that correct? Is that what we want to do, Mr.? No.
I'm just going to wait until you dismiss me. I'm sorry.
Oh,
You can go. You're dismissed. Minor subdivision to create one lot at Lakeshore Boulevard. Mr. Rogers, go right ahead.
well, and I guess get a quick clarification before you start. I thought this was tabled too. Is it tabled or not?
We thought it was tabled as well.
Okay.
To take it off the table.
Motion to remove item number 5 from tonight's agenda from the table.
Second.
Just call the roll.
Mr. Varga,
Without any additional information, I'll say no.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti,
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann,
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. So it's off the table now. What do we want to do here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Rogers. I'm the director of the Lake County Land Reutilization Corporation. And I'm here tonight because my secretary told me I had to be here, so I left Columbus at 4 to get here at 7. So, that being said,
Where's she working tomorrow?
I think there's a demo in the morning. That being said, we had petitioned the commission to consider a lot split of property that the land bank owns. I don't know how familiar you are with the property, but the property in question was subject to a lawsuit between the state of Ohio, the Osborne state, and I believe also a party to this lawsuit was the city of Mentor. In an attempt to resolve the lawsuit without having to be subject to further litigation, I was approached by the Ohio EPA and asked whether or not the land bank would be willing to consider taking the parcel or taking title to the parcel, with the understanding that we wouldn't incur many costs associated with the land involved, and that the money that was part of the settlement from the estate would be transferred to the state of Ohio and then be used to clean up or remediate the environmental concerns that are on the parcel. So we now own the land, and the intent was that once the property was cleaned up, it was to be transferred in total to the Natural History Museum so that it could be contiguous with their existing parcels, if you will, and maintained in a natural state. About 3 months ago, I was asked by the Natural History Museum as to whether or not we would be willing to consider lot split and donating half of the parcel to the Natural History Museum today, because apparently there is a grant that might be available, and by them acquiring this property, they could then apply for and hopefully receive a grant. The remainder of the parcel would remain, the title to the remainder of the parcel would remain in the hands of the land bank. We expect that we will have it cleaned up by probably within 5 years, hopefully a lot sooner. The remediation is expected to cost somewhere close to $15 million. And we have, as a result of the settlement, $10.5 million that was given to the state. And I believe the state has also budgeted an additional $1 million. But by virtue of the fact that the land bank owns it, as we're not a government agency, that would then make us potentially available for some of the Great Lakes restoration funds that are available through the federal government.
Okay.
So it was my hope that the board would consider doing the lot split so that we could give it to the Natural History Museum. My understanding is once they acquire it, the intent is to keep it in a natural state and continue doing the work that they're doing on the property that they own now.
Okay. If I could, real quick, we approved this lot split at an earlier meeting, and then the applicant at that time, which is a representative of yours, I believe,
So my understanding was,
asked not to do that.
okay, my understanding was that the lot split was approved, but it was conditioned upon, I believe,
Undevelopable. You
couldn't build on it.
Right. And I don't know that I necessarily, I don't know what the plans are for the Natural History Museum once they acquire it. I've only been told that they intend to continue keeping it in a natural state.
Let me ask you this question. Would they end up in turn selling that?
No, I think the intent is to keep it in perpetuity.
So,
There's if I recall correctly, that serves as a filtering system. There's about 1,800 gallons of water that goes through the marsh into the lake. So from as well as the natural habitat and the environment that's there, either 1,800 or 18,000 gallons. But it's, I mean, I'm certainly would hope that it would not be turned into anything other than what it is in a clean state.
I think that's our intent too, and I think that's why that condition was placed on that property at the time we voted on it.
Well, I would ask you to reconsider
Okay,
respectfully, and just that the lot split be granted, but the condition be removed. If the commission sees so fit to continue with what you decided, then we would probably hold off on donating the land until we were done, at which point then we would just transfer the entire parcel to them.
okay. Mr. Zeman, any comments you'd like to make?
Obviously, this is sort of a special lot split. Generally, don't create parcels of this nature, but obviously the marsh is a special circumstance. And I think, as Mr. Rogers indicated, this is really to facilitate the transfer of some portion of these lands to an entity that's going to be a custodian of these properties into the future. So, trying to say that you can't utilize property for its lawfully zoned purposes isn't really a condition that, frankly, I would encourage the board to consider. Now, that doesn't mean that every subdivision of any nature gets approved, but I think trying to stipulate that under no set of circumstances can it be developed. And when we're talking about development, obviously, you're not going to put a housing tract in there, but there may be opportunities for trails, parking, some type of a visitor pavilion or something of that nature. We don't know that. So I think that, frankly, the condition would be overly restrictive if it were to prohibit all development there.
Okay. So it would be the recommendation of the law department just to tackle this as a simple lot split? Or-
Correct. Again, no reason to believe it's, as the commission's aware, sometimes things are presented that may not be what they,
May not be what they seem to
obviously
be.
with the land bank and Mr. Rogers, obviously, and certainly the city has a lot of experience with the Natural History Museum. There's no reason to believe that their intent is anything other than what they're proposing. And we've had a lot of positive experience with the land bank, and I'm not here to vouch for them, but again, I think we don't have any reason to suspect this is not what it's presented to be.
Okay. So what's the pleasure of the commission?
Well, since it was myself who put the original provision on, to protect the land from development rather than to restrain the land split, I'll withdraw my concerns based on the good faith that this won't turn into a Hardee's restaurant or a very poorly designed subdivision. So I will move to, I'll make a motion to approve the lot split.
Minor subdivision?
The minor subdivision lot split.
Less the condition.
Minus the condition.
Minus the condition.
Minus that
Or are
condition.
we removing a condition, right?
We're going to remove the condition that I had placed on it.
Second.
Yes, when you're ready.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And you keep your secretary.
I plan to.
Okay. Rezoning of 186.53 acres from C1 Conservation and R4 to Planned Unit Development. When last we met,
Evening. Again, my name is Chris Herman. I'm a principal with MKSK. The Bolton family and our team, again, would like to thank you for having this special meeting for us last week. We appreciated all of your comments and questions that you raised, and we have come back tonight to work through and hopefully answer those concerns and issues. We've created a presentation that goes through them, and here, if you just go, we group them into 7 different categories. You asked about creating a separate sub-area for Bolton residents. We'll talk about that. Some questions about the preliminary plan. We'll talk about that. A number of questions related to the housing units and location. We'll talk about that. Some clarity on the public spaces and how they'll be maintained. We'll talk about that. You had a discussion about shared parking. We want to go through that. And we know that one of the biggest issues that came up last week was traffic, and we're going to talk about that as well. And then we also wanted to mention a little bit of detail about fiscal impacts of this proposal. So I'm going to run through this feel free, obviously, to interrupt me or ask questions. So starting with the first piece, I think it makes a lot of sense. You asked that the Bolton residence be separated as its own sub-area. So you'll see we've created a sub-area E of 8.5 acres. We carved that. It was in sub-area B, so sub-area B is correspondingly reduced in size. And go to the next slide. You'll see that we also addressed uses. You had mentioned the idea that you want to make sure that there's a potential for things like bed and breakfast, hotel use, event space, and yeah, one more slide back. There you go. So we have put those uses into the allowed uses for sub-area E. Basically, sub-area B, because it was part of sub-area E, because it was part of sub-area B, we had some retail uses, office, workspace, entertainment uses, civic uses, because we wanted to have some flexibility on what might happen in that residence and preserve it. But we've also added the bed and breakfast and the hotel uses and created its own sub-area, again, because it exists compared to the sub-area B. Hopefully that addresses that concern. The next question, or area of discussion, was the preliminary plan. So we wanted to show this diagram to you. This is a preliminary plan diagram, specifically on sub-areas B and C. Because there's concerns about, well, what about an outlot or a fast food restaurant? What we are doing with this plan is we are creating a development envelope. So that is the dark colored red and the dark colored purple. This is where the buildings would go. And then the center, as we mentioned before, center of the blocks, where the passing public, the people strolling on the streets don't experience it, is where we have the parking reservoirs. And so that's the hatched areas. So the buildings will go in those dark areas, the development envelope. They may be a little bit bigger than that. I don't think that'll be an issue with you as commission, but they will be along the edges of the street and the edges of the block, and then the parking will be towards the center of the block or in the center of the block. So we're hoping this helps address the concern about the development pattern that could happen here as it moves forward. Then we have the illustrative plan that again shows how those buildings then fit in that building envelope. So you can see the buildings again lining the street, the parking in the center. And I will address here the parking discussion, the shared parking discussion here in another bullet. In terms of housing units, go to the next slide. Again, this is what we brought to you last week. So we talked about, this sub-area A we're talking about is a residential sub-area, walkable residential neighborhood, tree-lined streets that connect into the conservation area and sub-area E, the Bolton Estates, surrounded by the existing earthen embankments. I think I mentioned it, but I want to mention it again tonight. Stormwater, you see the stormwater detention areas. They're designed to accommodate the drainage. And then we have typologies, which is the next slide. So this is what we showed you. As staff pointed out, the lots and street layout that we showed you here amounts to 180 lots. We showed how there's basically 4 different residential typologies that we're proposing. We have the typical single family, medium lot sizes, and I can't even read this anymore, but it's those are 50-foot wide lots. And then again, remember we're talking about alley-served lots, so garages in the rear, and we're talking about porches in the front, so it's very walkable, strollable, tree-lined street with sidewalks along the main street. Type B, typical is 30 feet wide, and then type C is the townhouse lots. And then we also have a type D, which is the estate lots. So the way we've laid it out here with these streets and this grouping of typologies, we end up with 180 lots. The question came up. We were saying we'd like flexibility. In the text, we talked about 180 to 300 units. So on the next slide, Larry, if you'd be so kind. we're showing how under the same street configuration, just by changing the amount of the different housing typologies from that 4, this pushes it towards, what did I write up there, 250 lots, 230, thank you, I can't even read.
Sorry, the brightness
It's
is really
much
bad.
worse than,
Yeah,
right. I was counting on, I'll pull up my copy so I can read along. 230, so this is showing basically replacing the estate lots with and extending the single family medium lots across the Johnny Cake frontage, and then expanding the smaller single family lots. So this is one arrangement, and I guess what we're trying to emphasize with this is that we want to be responsive to the market as this moves forward. These are the lot types we are committing to and the housing types, but the exact allocation of them within this area may change, and obviously we have to come back and present all of that to you at the final development plan stage, and you have to say yes. But we wanted the flexibility to be able to say somewhere between 180 and 300 on this sub-area A. And again, just as a reminder, 300 was the upper maximum that we're talking about, is half of what's permitted in the PMUD text, which was a max of 8 dwelling units an acre. At 300, we'd be just over 4 dwelling units an acre.
Could I ask just a quick question?
Absolutely, please.
In the second breakdown that you're showing right here, you said that would generate 230.
230 lots.
So how do you get to 300?
300, it's a great question. So 300, we didn't have time to do it for tonight. We still can if you'd like. We would adjust some of the road layouts. We just didn't get to the point where we're going to adjust the roads. But we would adjust some of the road layouts, still with the entries, still with the main streets going through there, but some of the block patterns would change in order to accommodate more lots. And we probably go more towards townhomes. So one example would be that townhome area C location basically extended further to the north and east. So just kind of make a mirror copy of it and put it right behind it. We'd have townhomes back to back. We would create a larger townhome component, which would increase the number of units. And by keeping the 30-foot lots and making more of the site 30-foot lots, you'd end up closer to 300.
But still that townhome band.
Yes.
Right, you're not going to push that over to center.
No.
Still the band, but.
Still the band. All right, so again, I think this goes back to some of the discussions we've had, on the preliminary plan versus the final development plan. We wanted some flexibility here because as we move forward in this, hoping that we get approval from all of you and from City Council and from the voters, when we come back at the final development plan stage, we would be bringing all these details, but we'd have developers with us that are partners that we can talk in detail about the materials and the composition of the exact market type to respond to your needs. So, again, just as a reminder, this are actual built examples of these different types at the same different kinds of widths. So you have at the bottom left, this is in Grandview Yard in Columbus. Those are the 30-foot wide lots. At the top right are the 50-foot wide lots. You can see a combination on the top left and the townhomes on the bottom right. So this gives you those different typology feels and what this space can look like. And then again, you saw the watercolor rendering. So now with our sub-area E, this is showing sub-area E, the Bolton Estate, and sub-area A, the residential, single-family residential area. And then I think appropriately brought up discussion about reviewing of architectural materials, particularly in the single-family development. Just wanted to, again, remind all of us going through your text that at the final development plan stage, we would be bringing the actual architectural and material designs for these things so you get to review and approve them. There are 4 pages in the PMUD text all about architectural requirements for, it's actually both commercial, but also most of it's on the residential requirements. So all of you have already put a lot of effort and time into pinning down the architectural requirements that have to be met as part of a development. It includes materials allowed, materials not allowed, architectural roof elevations, windows, facades, materials, percent of different types of materials, where they can go. It talks about the landscape, it talks about the screening. That's all in your text as part of the PMUD requirements. So we understand those. And whatever we bring back, the final development plan has to meet then those requirements through your approval process. And happy to go through those in detail if you want. I think I have a PDF with all of the different ones we could scroll through if that's helpful.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Mr. Cook.
Your conceptual plan shows 3 levels of residential density in A.
3 levels of single-family residential and townhomes, yes.
Right.
So 4 types, yes, correct.
Can you clarify which building types you're proposing using our plan development residential building type definitions in our planning, in our plan development? Because we have detached single-family, including
Gotcha.
cluster, attached single-family, and mid-rise multifamily. Is mid-rise multifamily? Because it's an option.
Right.
Is that something you're proposing?
Mid-rise is not in
Not in
sub-area
A.
A. It could be in sub-area B.
That band in sub-area B on the
Yes.
east side of your town center?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But
Okay.
not in sub-area A. Does that answer your question? I'm
It
happy
does,
to- okay.
it does.
Well, we-
Because I think it would work there, but I'd like to see more of the brownstone look,
Yeah.
townhome. You know, it's hard for us to wrap around 0 setbacks.
Yes, I understand
Because
that.
we don't build them here.
I understand it.
And you get to these other neighborhoods and you see them, but here, we don't build them. So, you know, I had scoured different neighborhoods to see and walk around on Google to see what would it look like. And like I said last time, done right, I think it can be very nice. I think it could be desirable for young owners and as well as people that want to sell their half-acre lot and move in there. You know.
I agree with you. And maybe it's helpful just to go a little more detail, both from the market study, but just from what we see, not just here in Mentor, what we're seeing actually across the country is that the type of housing supply that we do not have as our country ages is, and that is very desired, is the small lot, very well-appointed house with amenities around it that's very walkable and has mixed uses close by. The kind of idea that you don't have a big yard to take, you have a little bit of yard, but you don't have a big yard to take care of, or you have the townhouse and you have neighbors right there. It is a very appealing product. You don't have a lot in Mentor. We probably don't have enough in the region.
Oh, it's the old days of city lots.
Yes, and that's where the traditional neighborhood name comes
Do you have
from.
a comment?
The only suggestion would be to maybe modify the terminology townhome and so that it directly references the permitted use table, which would be attached single family.
Okay.
Can we condition sub-area A to not allow a mid-rise multifamily?
You can do whatever you want.
Even though it's it's on the chart?
Yeah, but
That would be part of you could add that as a condition.
presentation as it's laid out this evening does not include that.
Would you be willing to?
So yeah, just as a clarification, we actually have in the text use tables, and we did not put that type in sub-area
Right,
A.
but it's in our text though. So is our text a minimum? Or, you know,
I think
I just want people to understand
Yeah,
what's gonna go there because
I think your text is a baseline. Our text is saying this is what we're committed to do. So like our text says we're only doing these pieces from your text.
But rezoned
But we
this
can-
way, you could always go back, you know, and I just want to make sure that we just have 1 and 2 in sub-area A.
We are happy to clarify that.
And no 3.
However it makes you
Okay.
comfortable. Great, thank you. Then on, I think the next one was public space. You all mentioned about public space arrangement. We had a lot going on our slide previously. It still has a lot, but the point here is the dark green dashed area you can see is the conservation area. So that's 69 acres. This is the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. We'll get this. And again, remember that 35 acres is in the city of Mentor of that total 69, and 34 acres are within Kirtland Hills. But again, this is an invisible line. From the public's point of view, walking on these trails, it is 69 acres. From the development that happens around here, should this get approved, it's all one publicly accessible green space. So when you look at that 25% at the top, that 25% of the site is dedicated publicly open space, which exceeds the 20% requirement. That is actually only calculating the Mentor portion of the conservation area, so it would actually increase and kind of just in the way it's going to function, it's going to be more than that because the Kirtland Hills part will also be accessible to this entire development and close by and walkable. The other areas you can see are green spaces, includes the, we adjusted the trail, Commissioner Varga, that you asked about. So we have a more walkable trail around the perimeter of the site. Again, we're preserving the tree-lined entry into the state from Center Street. We've got different areas at the center of blocks. And again, these will probably be a little adjusted in the final development plan, but the idea is that there will be green spaces within a close walk of everyone in this development. We've preserved the natural stream corridors, and again, we've accounted for the stormwater retention as part of this development plan layout. So that's all included. And then if you go to the next slide, it has the same picture, but it has a little more text. Sorry. Go back up 2 more. You'll see here that we are proposing a master development association. So this is one of the questions you all came up, asked us. So it was also a very good question about how do we maintain this common open space. So there'll be this master development association. It will include an operating budget projection and funding plan as part of our final development plan. We'll come back in. It includes all of the residential and commercial areas, so all landowners will be members of this entity, and this master association will be responsible for maintaining and landscaping these common areas and green spaces, other than the conservation area, which again is under the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. Shared parking came up. We laid this out. Again, I'm sorry it's so light. We took one of the blocks, actually one of the denser blocks in sub-area B, and we've zoomed in on this. And again, I'm going to go back to that earlier slide about the development envelope. So here's the buildings in that development envelope around the outside of the block with the shared parking in the center of the block. Again, not that you experience as a pedestrian walking around, strolling the storefronts, outdoor dining, you don't experience that parking, but it's easy to get to. And then we've put numbers down of actual square footage and unit counts for those different buildings as we laid them out, and then the required parking per code, and then what the daytime, so peak for some of these, and the nighttime peak for other things like residential, and how that lines up to the total number of spaces we're providing here. And so we're actually providing one more space in that surface parking area than that development plan lays out. But the bigger point is, at the final development plan stage, we will be bringing each building to you, and we will show you where that building parks and then where spaces are shared, where spaces are dedicated for that use as part of the final development plan. So you can say, yeah, that makes sense, and we buy into that. And if it doesn't work, then we'll work on adjusting the plan. The one thing I should mention is we are not showing this calculation the on-street spaces. Again, we're going to be having in sub-area B on-street spaces, so that'll actually increase the number of available spaces to be shared between this development. So we're going to give you this example. We will do this kind of detail as part of the final development plan submission moving forward. But wanted to give you a sense of comfort that we can make this work and that we'll be able to park what we bring into you for approval.
And this is not, and I brought this up at the last meeting, especially with this kind of perimeter commercial development and maybe residential above. This is not based on a theoretical church, a theoretical movie theater, those kinds of uses, because I don't anticipate them in this kind of project. So I wouldn't want you to think that that would give you an advantage with the day-night and the weekday use.
I understand your comment, absolutely. And so that's why I wanted to show this. I agree. And if we did come back with a church integrated in one of these buildings,
well, that's fine. But
we would have to prove to you that the
I
parking.
just don't expect it, that's all.
Yeah. On the traffic side, actually, we have Lori Andrews here from Adams from DGL. Hi. She's going to talk to you about traffic because, again, we know that was a major issue. So up on the screen, we have the street layout as we presented to you last week. And then on the next slide, we also have just kind of context of the existing concerns, I think, for traffic today before anything would happen on the Bolton property. That's just a tee up here for Lori.
Thanks. Good evening. My name's Lori Adams, as Chris mentioned. I'm with a firm called DGL Consulting Engineers, and we have worked with the city on a few projects in recent times here. We've done some retiming of your 306 corridor and your 615 corridor with ODOT. We were also hired by the city to work on the Center and Tyler Boulevard area. And we worked with Classic Chevy to change their access with some of the changes that went in to the Center Street area there. So we are familiar with this area, and I worked with the city very successfully. We have collected traffic counts for this area, and we are aware that there are already some traffic issues that exist, particularly at Johnny Cake. There's some turn lanes and things that today really aren't what they should be. And so one of the suggestions, we would have would be we need to improve some of those things, but they are already there. This development obviously will generate traffic. That is also a fact, but there are issues today. You can see on the plan in front of you that there are 4 signals within this corridor that currently exist. We certainly expect those to stay. And with the street network that's being proposed and any additional access points to Center, we would expect perhaps another signal would be introduced there. We also believe that on Johnny Cake, with some of the residential outlet roads, that if there's more than one provided, it reduces the impacts and the concentration of traffic. But we expect that a lot of the property will be accessed by Center Street. It's going to be coming from Route 90 and using the interchange. Any questions?
Oh, okay. Commissioners, questions?
Well, I guess we don't know what the full impact will be. But we already know that Johnny Cake and Center Street is a problem. Can you speak to how this project would add to that, and what kind of, can you conceptually suggest what the solution would be at that intersection?
Well, we would suggest, just from today's traffic, that the westbound to southbound left turn lane should be extended. It's too short today. And that's primarily in the morning. That's where the traffic's going down to the interstate, and when it's returning in the evening, it's going north, and it makes that right-hand turn. So introducing a right-hand turn from Center to Johnny Cake would help alleviate the traffic as it's today.
Well, I just from my own experience, I know that heading west on Johnny Cake, approaching Center Street, that the backup occurs during the day at different times. I can't tell you exactly why, maybe in the morning, but all the way back to the curve, that it'll be back up that much. So that's already a problem. I am sure the city has some plan someplace to address some of that, but the reality is there's already a significant backup. I can only imagine people coming out of those Johnny Cake drives, turning west, because that's how they would circle back, eliminating the whole division or subdivision to go through. They're just adding more traffic to that westbound approach, and I'm just concerned. That's all. It's already a problem, and I can't measure it, but I know just from observation that's a problem, and that this will just add to that. It would seem to me that the street would almost have to be widened, or another lane or another turning lane created, just to take the pressure off of that. So, I mean, in my mind, that starts to become we have the city here. The city's, that may not be your doing, that may be the city's doing in order to have this happen, so. Yeah.
Any infrastructure work on 84, I'd like to see it get taken out of the south end there between the mound, so that you're not taking lanes out you know, even though it probably needs a right turn only lane as well, you've got that whole corner property that is on the other side of the mound. So if you were gonna add a lane, whatever's gonna happen there, I'd like to see it go into that direction rather than the north side of Johnny Cake,
Okay.
to where, you know, the houses are already there.
That's a bigger problem.
Yeah, you'd create a bigger problem.
It's my understanding that the development team and the property owner are willing to
Give right away away.
to
essentially,
work
right.
to find that right solution to recognizing that there already is a problem here, and they're willing to work with the city to find the right solution.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
I'll just make some general comments on that. I don't know that we're willing to accept the idea that, I mean, anecdotally, there may be some backups during peak times, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that the level of service there is deficient just now and accept that. I mean, typically, any new development, there would be an expectation that the developer would share or pay the lion's share of any improvements needed to provide service to that. I don't know what that is. That's why we require traffic analysis. That would be done in the final plan submission phase. And obviously, we'll be adding a lot of units here. There may be some improvements. I can promise you there need to be a signal off of Johnny Cake there. There may also be some opportunities to provide a revenue source with the development to help offset those. So a lot of things to consider. I think we all agree that it's going to create more traffic and that has to be managed. I'm confident we'll be able to manage it, but it almost certainly will require some improvements.
Because
And very likely on Center Street.
Because my fear is somebody's headed north on Center, they see the backup, so they make a right turn into your development and worm their way through so that they can come out on Johnny Cake and make a right
And bypass the turn.
and bypass the intersection altogether. So it has to work to where
Correct.
they'd rather go to the light than,
Right, and we're beginning those analyses of what the traffic will become, and as I said, the team is willing to discuss all those things and make sure that the city and the right solution is found.
Remember, on the Newell Creek property across the street, that has a 100-foot buffer that is in perpetuity. So you can't shave any of that away. Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Did she take enough time?
I think so.
Good.
Good evening, Ken Kalinchuk with PMC. I just wanted to talk briefly about the positive benefits of this project for the city of Mentor. In addition to creating a town center environment that could become a central gathering place for residents and visitors to the city that all the residents are proud of showing to their friends and family visiting to their neighborhoods and their homes and the city itself, and the conservation area, which will be opened up to the public through this rezoning effort, we think there are substantial benefits to the city of Mentor from the proposed project. Based on the build out of the preliminary plan shown and illustrated in the documents, we think there will be significant revenues for the city through different taxes like income and real estate, above $600,000 per year once this is all built out. And additionally, we think this site could hold over 500 jobs, which would be available for Mentor residents and non-residents of Mentor alike. And we think the schools will benefit significantly through over $2.5 million of estimated real estate taxes for the Mentor local schools. So we just wanted to touch base on some of the potential conservative impacts of this project for the city of Mentor once it's all built out. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chris. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So hopefully I think if we didn't touch on some questions, feel free to circle back, but we tried to answer some of the key things that came up at our discussion last week.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Mr. Sidoti?
Just a couple of points. I'm not going to beat on the traffic because it's been discussed fairly thorough. But, we're not going to know the total impact until the clinic builds at Satellite Hospital. And we know there's going to be a tremendous amount more traffic. So that's something that's going to have to be addressed and gonna have to be done right. Your gentleman here was talking about built out. Was your firm involved in the Kentland in Gaithersburg, Maryland, just outside of Washington?
We were not, but I am familiar with it, yes.
It's almost a carbon copy of what we're talking about here. And he was mentioning all the benefits with a build-out. Out there, I think you're in your 26th year, and it's finally getting built out. The Kmart with the retail stores attached, that was like 2015. Which, knowing, if you know the market, I don't know the market out there, but knowing that part of the country and knowing this part, what kind of a projection do you have for a build-out here? I mean, I see the residential maybe going quicker.
Yeah,
but
I
what
think
do
in
you-
today's market, the residential would go quicker. I mean, there's several people on our team that could answer this question even better. I think that particularly sub-area C is attractive because of the proximity to 90 and the interchange there. I think with the Cleveland Clinic, if they advance their plans, I think that really makes some great synergy between these two sites, and I think that would accelerate interest on both sides for development here.
Do you see a similar build-out, 20 years, maybe?
So we had Gibbs Planning Group perform some market studies, which we submitted as part of our submittal for this rezoning application. And they contemplated that this specific program and much more residential above what we're actually proposing would be built out by 2030.
2030?
Yeah, there's enough market demand currently in Lake County to support this development by 2030.
Pretty ambitious. It's my understanding that this has to eventually go to the voters. Is that correct, Mr. Zeman?
Yes.
I'm already hearing misinformation, rumors, people talking kind of crazy, scaring other people. To sell this to the voters, are you planning to do a series of public workshops, public meetings, so that the right information is getting out there and being understood, so that when the voters go, it's just not an automatic no and walking out?
I think it's a great point. We have been talking internally about that. Ken, you want?
We have engaged a consultant to work with the public to help correct some of this misinformation that's going around surrounding the project. If it's a requirement of Planning Commission that some of those be public workshops where we bring the public in and show them stuff, we're open to that feedback from you in the city.
That's
We agree. It's important to get ahead of it.
You heard all the compassion about the Bolton estate, especially at the last meeting, from both sides, the residents and from the commission members. And you, obviously, you agreed with Mr. Varga and you created sub-area E. But it's easy to say, you know, we really want to do this if it's economically feasible, if this and that. Knowing the push behind that, what have you done up until now? What is planned, and what's your vision on seeing if you can make that work?
So it's important to the family, it's important to our team. We're having a number of different conversations, kind of pursuing multiple avenues to see if there's interest and how we can make this preserved and intact and used, either as part of the development or with a private operator or with some public agency that might be interested in this space. So we're having multiple conversations. I don't know, Ken, do you want to add anything to this? So we're working on trying, I think the idea is that when we come forward at the final development plan stage, we would have some solutions to share with you.
Yes, we definitely took the Planning Commission and city staff's notes on this to heart. And as you can see in the uses by sub-area that we're proposing for sub-area E, we are going to pursue potential bed and breakfast and hotel users for this. But again, we have to have interest. It has to be feasible. And if you know anyone who is interested in converting the home, please reach out to us and let us know. But it could be many things.
I also think it becomes more attractive and more doable with the rest of the development around it. So it's part of something. So I think we'll have better conversations if this moves forward.
If I'm not mistaken, they incorporated the Kent estate into that development out there in Maryland.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
prominent
Absolutely.
in their town square, you know. Your agreement with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, you're not actually sitting down now and negotiating an agreement. You're waiting till everything else falls into place. You just have their commitment, or are you actually negotiating?
We have an agreement in principle, I think, following successful rezoning of this ground. Do you want to add anything to that?
And for the.
They're very interested, and I'm sorry they came to the last two meetings, and I didn't know it was appropriate for them to weigh in or not. But we don't have them here tonight, but I think they're very interested in this, obviously.
And last comment, for the record, you have no letters of intent, no letters of interest, no developers you're talking to right now?
We have, it's interesting, the press from this meeting has generated a number of calls. So now we're having discussions with people, and probably someone on this team probably could answer that better than me. But there are people now contacting us because they've seen it in the press.
Yes, we've had home builders and different commercial builders and tenants reach out since they've seen this in the press, but they want to make sure that the zoning is there in place before they pursue it with a lot of money.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else?
I
Mr.
just
Varga?
have a couple questions that are going to bounce around a little bit. In the list of the original proposed conditions, there was a recommendation from the fire department about the 15-foot separation. The proposal you have for sub-area A, does that take that into consideration, or does that modify that?
That is a great, thank you for bringing that up. I meant to touch on that. That's a really, really, really important point. We are actually that is one condition we are asking to modify. We agree, we should say, we agree with the staff's conditions. That was the one I think we were concerned about. And again, I think we've had discussions. We understand that this text was, just developed this past year for this. Our reaction based on projects in other communities doing this kind of development is that 15 feet or larger are the typical suburban standards. And the reality is when you're trying to create these compact cluster walkable communities, you need to have that number down. So that's why we put actually those dimensions on there in red. I'm sorry, again, you can't see it. There's, I think, 8 feet and, I gotta pull my slide out.
8 and 10.
8 and 10.
Mm-hmm. So the size.
So we would agree to, in typology A, we would agree to 10 feet, and typology B, we would agree to 8 feet as the minimum separation between buildings.
So do they have to be a non-combustible material?
Yeah, so I mean,
Less than 15 feet? So it have.
Less than 10 feet, you have to be a 1-hour construction.
so yeah, there's all sorts of requirements on the building code side.
And very limited openings, because the openings would have to be rated too. And I just, to throw that out, because that is now a restriction in the way you can design those buildings.
We understand. And I think the other thing, just I guess also to mention is, the building shapes will change. So there'll be places that will be 15 feet or more separation, but there may be, we wanted this because there may be places where they get that close.
And another question I had for you was, and maybe the city has reviewed this already, and I didn't see it in the notes. There was a question about the cul-de-sac going into sub-area C. Are we still over the 600-foot cul-de-sac? And if we are, how are we dealing with the concerns about fire and safety? And, has that all been considered?
That's one we'd love to come back and realize among all of us that is something we've got to address. That we'd love to come back and deal with at the final development plan stage. The reality is, and again, you're all aware of this, we have ODOT limited access right away on Center Street. So there's no way to return there. Plus, we have some spacing distances, so we can't get an access point there. We have Kirtland Hills, and we have 90 limited access to the south. We've got wetlands and the conservation area to the east, so there's almost no way not to do. You end up the cul-de-sac, and the length really is determined on how sub-area C develops.
Well, and that's my concern, and that is that, as shown, and I'm not trying to be dramatic about it, but it would put the area development that you show in question as being viable. You want us to, I guess you want us to vote on this tonight, or at least move the project forward. My concern is that whole area, based on your master plan or this level of development, is based on an assumption that doesn't meet with the city's requirements. I'm just throwing that out.
Sure.
I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how you feel about it. I'm interested to know how this, Kathy, I don't want to. don't want to interrupt you, but that issue about the cul-de-sac length, fire and safety, city standards, their preliminary design is based on that being longer than our required limit. Do you have a response to that now, about how we feel about that?
Well, one of the things we were just talking about is, we believe we had checked that distance, and we thought it was less than 600, but it would be something that we would want to see that would be verified before moving forward.
I just have a feeling from looking at it, it might be more than 600.
It's close, yeah. It's
Well,
probably
okay.
a little, it's probably a little more.
I'm not trying to stir the pot. I'm just saying that if the plan is based on that and it's still an issue with the city, you know, how is this a viable plan to go forward with without some kind of conceptual solution there?
Mr. Varga, I sincerely appreciate you bringing these are important points.
Yeah. And just from the city, just so I understand, this is the first time we've had this zoning approach.
Yes.
Are we being asked to vote on this tonight?
It's up to us.
It'd be wonderful.
Well, what I'm looking for is, can you outline the complete process?
Yeah, I was going to ask the chairman.
That's all I was kind of
to
getting
ask
at,
the
is that
auditor.
can you outline the complete process relative to this zoning and this approach as to the steps and the approvals that would take place to the point where they can draw a permit?
Right, excellent question.
That's a long process. I'll
Well,
do my best to
I'm sorry.
If the planning commission is satisfied that they have presented an acceptable preliminary subdivision plan, and that it is in accordance with good planning practice, that this property should be rezoned in accordance with that plan, it would then make a positive recommendation to the city council. The city council then will review it, conduct a public hearing on it, take public comment, of course, and it can accept, reject, modify it, ultimately via an ordinance. If the city council finds favor with the rezoning request and that preliminary plan, whether it's modified or otherwise, it would then refer that matter to the ballot. It would be placed on the ballot for PMUD. The people of Mentor citywide would then decide whether or not this should be rezoned pursuant to the approved plan. If it passes, the property is then rezoned once that election is certified. They then come back and would have to go through the final site development process. And as is indicated, you get a lot more particulars, precise utility locations and precise footprints and parking counts and all that. The key to all of that, though, is that the final site plans have to be in substantial agreement with the preliminary. And so I guess one of the questions for the commission tonight is whether or not it's got because there's been some new things presented tonight. I think the development envelope is something that has not been seen before, and whether or not the commission is satisfied that it can properly craft sufficient conditions tonight in accordance with what's been presented to have a preliminary plan that it's comfortable with, that has enough specifics to it in all material respects, so that ultimately, if it were approved and it comes back for final, you know that final plan is going to be in accordance with the preliminary. Now, to get to that point A to point B, you really do have to make sure that everything that you think should be addressed in the preliminary has been addressed in the preliminary. And so if there are open questions, if there are some things that you feel haven't been sufficiently detailed, if you'd prefer that there be a better commitment on the part of the applicant or on a part of the administration relative to where it's coming from, well, then certainly it's not ripe for your action tonight. On the other hand, if you're satisfied with what's been presented, then certainly you can move it forward.
Were you going to say something?
I have a question on the length of the cul-de-sac. We've been, is it 600 feet? Is it a little more? Is it a little less? I think that's something we have to know the answer to.
So we've discussed that we can make it work at 600 feet.
Well, again, remember, we're talking about a preliminary plan. We're talking about approving again, not necessarily the precise footprint of a building, but certainly the street layout that's been proposed. Now, of course, when you come back for final, there's going to be adjustments, a few degrees, north, south, east, west. But you're looking at something which is not open-ended, something which is concrete, something which can change, but that's not the intent. Again, the intent would be that the approved preliminary plan is going to inform to a substantial degree the final. And if that's not the case, if for some reason there's a request to modify the approved plan at final, which is not in substantial agreement with the preliminary, that then becomes an impermissible amendment. And so the rezoning process begins anew. In other words, I'll try to present an extreme example. Let's say in an extreme example, Zone C, suddenly there's a thought that maybe that should be an appropriate location for multifamily, even if the building footprints were going to be somewhat the same and everything. Now that there would be a determination, is that a substantial departure from the original site plan? And if the answer is yes, it can't be approved. It goes back to the ballot. And likewise with every aspect of this. And so there should be some good measure of confidence that what's been proposed is feasible, both with the market and with practical approaches to development. And obviously, you've got a lot of engineering, not detailed engineering in front of you, but you've got a good feel for where the wetlands are and things of that nature. There's topography and everything. So just to make it clear to the members of the public, there's a tremendous amount of information which is already before the commission and available to the administration, including the market studies and things of that nature. So, but by no means is this just a sketch. There's a lot of data that is supporting what's being proposed. That said, I think that there are some open-ended questions. For example, in the Zone A, where it's proposed that it's going to be a front porch neighborhood, and service alleys will provide both vehicular access and presumably garbage collection and all of those other mundane things. The manner in which it's been proposed in the street layout and the distance separation, that may be a function of what's been presented by the applicant. In other words, not having front entry garages. If that is material to this approval, if that design is material to this approval, then that's something that needs to be discussed, and that's something that needs to be concrete. If in fact, for some reason, the market wouldn't support that type of housing product, and there was a request that it be modified so that there could be the service alleys, for example, would be eliminated, requiring some front entry. Now, that may or may not be a critical decision point relative to the Planning Commission's judgment as to whether or not that's an appropriate plan for Part A. If it is, though, I think it's better to call it out now as a substantial departure, something that would require it to be completely revisited should a change of that nature be made. And again, there could be multiple examples of that. But I do think that now identifying some of the things that really are critical, if in fact this is an acceptable plan, some of those aspects that are really critical to it being an acceptable plan, and some of the things that would require to if they fail, if they do not materialize, if it would require it to begin anew, it would be good to call those out now, I think, for the benefit not just of the city, but certainly for the benefit of the property owner as well.
And let me understand too, when you said that, okay, at some point we approve this, at some point the city council approves this, at some point the voters approve this. Now as the project goes forward, you spoke about the final reviews. Are you talking, would there ever be a final review of the entire property, or you're talking about final reviews of portions of the property?
Realistically, and I think that, not to speak for the developer's representative, but this is going to probably be a phased plan. In other words, you're not going to have a single developer who's going to come in who does both commercial, build a hotel, and is also doing single-family detached. You just really don't see that. So odds are it gets turned over to a home builder, and it may be different home builders. It may be multiple home builders. Some may specialize in the townhouse projects. Some may specialize in the detached. Obviously, commercial construction is radically different from what your typical home builder is experienced with, and you don't necessarily see too much overlap in those companies. So yes, if I'm betting, I'd say,
Incremental.
yeah, I would say
And-
yes. It's going to be a multi-phase project.
And the reason I bring it up is because I don't want the last portion of the project to be approved, burdened with having to pick up all the parking that wasn't picked up properly with the earlier versions. I mean, my parking is still in my head a concern. I know you've gone through and explained it, but if the goals and objectives of the parking and as it starts to build out isn't fully reached, or the reality of that sharing doesn't work, that the end of the project becomes problematic and then could fail. I mean, you know, then what's left is a huge parking lot in the middle of the project, and I'm desperate not to have that kind of build-out occur, and since we never really get another bite of the apple of the overall, we only get parts, that at some point there's the end, there's the caboose portion of the project, and that may be where all the sins are buried, you know.
I understand that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, in order to really make an effort at identifying all these certain conditions and these potential problems and the things that we want to see, so that this is a good plan, something that we can move it forward, can we as a commission go into a work session meeting, like an executive session, and discuss all these potential aspects and come up with a, you know?
An executive session would not be allowed under law. However, what you're phrasing, a work session, would basically just be another special meeting that would have to be advertised and open to the public, where this would just be your topic of discussion. But that has to be public and completely transparent. But I think executive sessions, it probably didn't mean it the way that us lawyers use it.
Yeah, right.
I just have a question. When we developed Newell Creek, or Newell Creek was developed, there were a bunch of proffers that were put into, you can't have this, you can't have this, we think you should have this.
Right.
I haven't seen any of that here.
No, the old PUD regulations, as the commission is aware, were a blank slate, and that was the process. Basically, everyone sat down and hashed out a very comprehensive development plan and figured it out. The PMUD district regulations are a new, more I don't know, contemporary or progressive approach to it. They're certainly better than just the blank slate that was the PUD. I think with this specific project, there's obviously there's a vision that's being presented, but and in fairness to the applicant and the property owner, I mean they're not saying that this is shovel ready, and they've been very, very transparent about the fact that this is something which, if the city and the people embrace this vision, they can go out there and try to find members of the development community and businesses and residents who want to buy into this. So I think the challenge for the Planning Commission and as this moves through the process is to, again, identify what's truly material to that vision, knowing that often change is inevitable, and it's probably realistic to think this is a 20-year build-out, and the world 20 years from now may be very different than the world it is today. I think the lessons of Newell Creek, Mr. Chairman, we went through that. So originally there was and just a little history, just so everyone knows what Chairman Snow is referring to. Originally there was a lifestyle center. That was the mixed-use commercial area that was proposed, and there were development standards. It was much like the town center that's being proposed here. And it was modeled after a legacy. It was that was what that product was labeled at that point in time. The economy tanked. It didn't happen. Ultimately, there were some modifications when Avery identified that area as someplace that it wanted to locate. And once Avery decided that would be a place for its headquarters, things really changed radically after that. And after that, those areas to the south of Norton Parkway were really earmarked for Class A medical and office use. And city officials were quite adamant, and there were some proposals for different types of uses in there, and those proposals were rejected. Now, ultimately, Hopefully, the clinic will be breaking ground soon, and I think everyone is aware of that's become a significant job center now for the city. And that's probably a good 5 years away from build out, depending on the clinic's plans. So, to answer Mr. Snow's question, a lot of that happened because, again, the development agreement afforded the city a lot of control to work with the owners and then the owners' successors in interest to make sure that that the city's vision was materialized in there and that it was put to its highest best use. They're again more pure retail, like a larger supermarket. That was something that was rejected. Apartments were rejected, and there were some other things that were floated in there. So this kind of actually goes a bit back to what the original vision was for New Oak Creek. The economy is different now, and Mentor's different now, of course. But yes, it served the city well to have a very clear understanding of how it would be developed in the future, and knowing that positive changes were something that the plan would support, and ultimately that is what has happened over the years.
Mr. Cook.
There are many interesting aspects to this proposal, and I've taken a great deal of time to understand your vision. The planned development zoning will ultimately be approved or denied by the voters of Mentor. I hope that in this process, your vision is clearly illustrated to the voters so that they can make an informed decision. So the onus will be on you, ultimately, to...
Mr. Filipiak.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think if the commission is interested in acting this evening, we would probably want to highlight a few additional conditions that staff has recommended based on some discussions since the last meeting, very recently. I might start with a couple of questions. Since you have revised the sub-area A, I think we probably are all in a better position by defining exactly which of these proposals is going to get attached to the plan. It's either the 188 or the 230 lots. I mean, when this gets presented to the voters in some manner, it has to, it's not a sliding scale. They're going to have to see something. It's probably our opinion that the higher density is better because it allows, it's a lot easier to go down, right, and lower the density and say it's still in substantial compliance if you look to amend this down the road. That would probably be our suggestion. Also, my one question with respect to the changes in these numbers now in sub-area A, would your trip generation report have to be altered?
No, we gave them market study numbers, and so we're not touching the market. We're not approaching the top of the market study numbers in this development plan. So we gave them the Gibbs market study that said, here's the numbers. For the
so you're giving us trip generation numbers based on over 1,800 potential units.
It was much higher, yeah. Do you remember what the number?
That was, well, it was a lot higher than what you're going to propose.
It was the
here.
maximum. So it was 600 units.
Was that 600 inclusive, so single family and then the residential units in area, sub-area B?
Correct.
Probably close to the 600. So it's probably fairly close.
Yes.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, so in light of what was presented tonight, and I know everyone hasn't had a long time to digest this. I mean, we didn't have a long time to digest it either. We made some suggested modifications to the proposed conditions that were originally submitted in the staff report. So anything that's in red those are add-ons and modifications. So just to clarify some things, particularly like item 4, basically recognizing that they've added now a sub-area E. So we're saying sub-areas A through E inclusive shall be approved as part of the preliminary plan submitted on November 14th. This was a comment number 5 that actually the fire department had made, and so I thought it was important to add that to and it came after your staff report was presented to you. So if the concept of on-street parking on both sides of the street is used, the street shall be wide enough to support 2 lanes of traffic, which I believe it does, but we just wanted to state that as a condition. Item 6 has been modified, and this kind of goes back to your comments, Mr. Varga, with regard to that 15-foot. The 15-foot spacing is a recommendation, and so one of the things that I spoke with our chief building official about is that there's actually a smaller minimum that's in the building code,
Sure, no.
which I believe is, I think he said it was 8 foot was the minimum. So that's why we've modified it to say building spaces shall be identified, rather than putting that specific number in there. We don't have a specific number of separation in the plan development code regulations. So,
Commission has seen us work with other developers on fire break methods with respect to buildings in close proximity. I have high confidence that we would be able to work that out. So we would do that in the final plan approval.
Okay.
I think with regard to item 7, I think it's still important to make sure that we clarify on the plan and label on the plan where there's that potential for 2 to 3 story residential unit types. And again, this is in sub-area B. Kind of going to your point, Brian, about, this is where, in our interpretation, that would be the mid-rise multifamily, which is how the schedule of permitted uses outlines it. So it would be more real if we could have that realistic, or that number identified, and those particular residential unit types identified in that particular sub-area. The sub-area maps are very helpful, and I would assume that those would be part of that approval, and to have that breakdown identified on the sub-areas is something that we're suggesting. Also, in item 8, the buildings proposed along Norton Parkway corridor, and again, this is within sub-area B. We just want to guarantee that those buildings that, as you come in and enter into the development, don't turn into apartments. We want to see that be that ground floor retail, or maybe some office, small office. And they've indicated that on the plan, but again, we just wanted to make that a condition. That, we obviously are recognizing that there is that residential component in sub-area B, but that's as you get into that area further east. Yep.
And I think that's important because, again, as a commission has recognized, if you're asked down the road to make amendment to this, it has to be substantially in conformity to the preliminary plan. Sometimes, fairly often, we would view a less active use, like moving from commercial to residential, as something acceptable. I think in this particular case, where they've identified these buildings with tonight's submission, building B, C, and D, it's important to designate that as ground floor retail, because as Ms. Mitchell pointed out, we don't want to see those become strictly apartment complexes along there. I also think that it's important for the public to fully understand, because I think that's going to be a hook that actually lends some favorable view on this proposal. I mean, from some of the comments that we've received back, that's creating that town center means that people who don't live there might have the opportunity to walk and shop and experience that. If it's just apartments, they're not going to have that. So we like that part of it. We'd like to firm that up, that remains as a primary component of this.
Item 10 was added. This was a discussion point that you had made at the last meeting. If there were specific uses that you felt needed to be prohibited, although obviously we have a schedule of permitted uses, if you wanted some clarity to make sure that there was no loopholes later on, I think the one that came up And again, it's not listed in the schedule of permitted uses, but if you wanted to make sure and add drive-throughs, that would be something that would be prohibited. I don't think that that's envisioned in this type of, in style of development anyway, and I guess Chris can speak to that. You know, with the walkability feature of this type of development, you wouldn't need the drive-through feature. But if there was something else that you felt that was very important to note, a specific use that you wanted to call out, now would be the time to do that in this, you know, and work with the applicant on that. So that's why number 10 was added. And when we've updated some of the terminology in item 13 with the, as you've noted, the use of the term conceptual was removed in most of the plans that you've reviewed. So now we're back to a preliminary plan, illustrative plan, and supporting sub-area maps. And we've also clarified how the Bolton House, or we would recommend it would be used with the uses that are outlined for sub-area A, again, as outlined in the uses by sub-area map that was submitted tonight. So those were some of the items. We have a couple items that we were kind of talking about as we were working over this. Did you?
Yeah, so I know that it's your intention to have the conserved area open to the public. Ultimately, that's you're going to be responsible for finding out how that would come into practice. Are you willing to commit to that as a condition?
That the conservation area is open to the public
Yes.
through the Western Reserve Land Conservancy's ownership.
Yes.
We can't speak on behalf of them, but that is their full intent at this moment, yes.
So can we make that a condition? Or are you comfortable with that? I know we can do it. Are you comfortable with us doing that?
We are comfortable. I hope that there might be a chance that we can respond to a few of these conditions before any action is taken, that we might have 2 to 5 minutes to speak as a group to confirm with ownership that we're okay with them.
And then on a similar note with that, because our city has no jurisdiction in Kirtland Hills, we would, there's only 35 acres of that conserved area in Mentor. The remainder's on the other side of the border. I think it would be nice to see a condition placed in there where it places final approval on the condition that a conservation easement is in place in their jurisdiction, so that we're guaranteed a 69-acre conservation area.
So I guess,
You guys wanna huddle up?
yeah, just to make sure we're all on the same page, that'd be great if you just give us 5 minutes.
Okay,
Well, we gotta move on to the next one and then revisit
yeah, we
this.
can do that, sure.
Getting a thumbs up.
What's that?
They don't need 5 minutes.
Hey, we might be okay. Looks like less than 5 minutes.
It's still too much.
I know.
I think so.
I mean, I'm looking at some of this stuff for the first time. I don't think it's all see the voters.
We accept the conditions.
Wow, that was easy.
We appreciate your detailed feedback and
Absolutely.
attentiveness to the project throughout this process.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think we just want to be clear on what papers are going to be part of this actual submission. Going to be asked to.
This may not be a popular proposal, but some of this we saw for the first time at the beginning of the meeting. The list of proposed conditions may be growing, may be refined more, may, fill in the blanks. I know everyone wants to move right along. This is the biggest project in Mentor and it will be for a long time. I personally, I'm not speaking for anyone else, but I personally think I need more time to digest some of this. So, again, it's probably not a popular thing, but I would propose we table this until we can organize and maybe another
Is that a
meeting.
motion?
That's a motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Before I second it, that was the point I was trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is that I want to make sure that we're covering as much as we can possibly think of and cover before we take a vote. So I'll second Mr. Varga's motion.
Okay. Jess, it's been moved and seconded to the table. That takes precedent. Did you have a comment?
Yes, our request would be that if this is tabled once again, that a special session be set up between now and December 9th so that we have a chance to consider that before middle of December.
We can work on that.
It's not a demand, it's a request.
Okay. Jess, call the roll, please.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. So it's on the table. Did you want to make a motion for a special meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with a special meeting. Some of this moves so fast that I'm not sure what we're doing when we're doing it, and I don't want to,
That's my
I mean,
point.
yeah, I mean, I saw most of this at the beginning of the meeting. So I think we could, let's just propose that we have another special meeting. We kind of refer to it like a work session, but we can't have that, so we have to have a meeting.
I'm sorry, you have a work session, it just needs to be public.
It has to be public. No, that's
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. It has to be public. Let me ask one question about if it's public, can the public speak at a work session if we want
No,
them to?
the public hearing's been closed.
Okay. I just didn't know if we had a work session, if that's different than.
The work session would effectively be a special meeting.
Okay,
let's
that's
face
fine.
it.
I just want to know what the
I
rules
mean,
are.
whatever label we give to it, it would be a special meeting.
Okay. But I would propose we have a special meeting, and we can work out the details. I don't know what the details are. I don't know where people are available, but before the December 9th meeting.
But it'll be before the 9th.
That's great.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
Okay. I'm sure you can understand there's an awful lot here.
Can we just point out something?
Please.
Just so you know, and I think we talked about this on the phone, but once you make a recommendation, council, they have to set a public hearing, and in order for them to set a public hearing, they have to make notice in the paper 2 consecutive weeks prior to the meeting. So you can schedule a special meeting, but then what happens is, and this impacts you guys more than it does them, but it then becomes a problem for when council. So that's the issue. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. I mean,
I understand the calendar. I understand the demands of the calendar, but I just can't.
Fine,
I
I'm
just
throwing
can't.
it out there. I need
no,
them to
understand.
hear that.
I just
need everybody to hear that.
I just feel that we can't be rushed through this.
Good point. So Kathy, let me ask you a question. Can you advertise to council while we're having a special meeting, and then they can withdraw it?
I doubt very much that procedure would be acceptable.
Acceptable to who?
Again, the council would have to act on any recommendation within a reasonable time period. So I don't know that we can, prior to council deciding that it may be placed on a specific agenda, that we can just start advertising for that. So there'd have to be some communications with the president of council relative to exactly when that agenda would be set. So I'd be way out of bounds to tell you that that we can put the cart before the horse on that.
Okay. Yes.
So the council's next meeting is December 3rd. And in order to, if we were to get it to that meeting, you would have to have a special meeting next Thursday.
Or before next Thursday.
Or before next Thursday, but
By
next
next Thursday.
next week. So that then notice could be, yeah, because actually they need 48 hours to get the notice in the paper. So,
I mean, are we trying to achieve something here that isn't being stated as to when this has to be approved? I mean,
Well, I think the applicant would like to, if the commission approves it, they would like council to be able to consider it at their first meeting in December. So we're backing away from that with a 2 weeks of notice requirement. That puts you to next week. Or council considers a special meeting.
Oh, they could do it too.
Yeah, they could. If, don't know that, just can't speak for them at this point.
So
And
we could-
again, this all translates back to when the time that they're required to have prior to, in order to get on the ballot spring.
Did you have a comment you want to make?
Yeah, I just had a question regarding the procedures. Can the commission put extra conditions on after they've approved and submitted to council?
No, but council can.
Oops.
I guess the one other point clarifying, stepping back 20 minutes, I wanted to make was within our proposal, table 3.1, permitted uses by sub-area outlines based on the table of the only permitted uses within the PMUD text, the uses we were planning on restricting each sub-area to. So, you know, our thought was by submitting this, each sub-area has very defined uses that are already permissible under the PMUD code, and that we would be held to that when we came back for additional final approvals later on in the process. So unlike perhaps how the previous process worked where the uses that weren't permitted were defined, our understanding from the legislation you passed this year, and you're the experts in this, not us, is that, you know, these are the only uses that are permitted, and anything that strays away is an unpermitted use. This is table
As
3.1 in the
a
package.
condition of approval. Those would be the limitations of use as a condition of approval.
Correct. That was our understanding in submitting this and our intent. So that, for example, and you know, commercial uses that you didn't want to see along Johnny Cake Ridge, we made it very clear that we were not proposing those along Johnny Cake Ridge because the only sub areas those uses would be permitted in were B and C. So we can clean up this table and add sub area E with uses that are acceptable to you. That's something we can do.
Okay.
That'll further clarify for the entire site.
Well, we tabled this evening, so we'll be back on a date, and I'll talk to Council President Krieger and see if we can schedule appropriately. So that's where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your time.
Okay.
New business, informal rezoning of 73.5 acres from R4 to RVG. Right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. David Francisconi with Pulte Homes. We're here to informally to discuss again Brookview Reserve. Thank you guys for having us back again to collaborate again informally prior to us doing a formal submittal for rezoning and preliminary plan for Brookview Reserve. We're here to talk about the parcel on the south side of Johnny Cake Ridge Road, south of the mall area there. The parcel is bounded by large-scale destination retail to the north, high-density residential to the east, R4 residential and RVG zoning to the west, and then we have the highway to the south there. This parcel, we believe, is a good candidate to be rezoned to RVG, is a good transitional rezoning from the R4 and the RVG to the R10 to the east there, and we believe it will suit the customers we are trying to attract and what Mentor is trying to attract to the area.
let me ask you a pointed question. How come you can't develop it as R4? Or could you?
Well, that's a very good question. We, in our formal submittal, we'll submit a chart that compare and contrasts the two zoning. But for the most part, the R4 targets a consumer group that we feel basically with the rezoning, we feel we can target a different consumer group that is not at the price range of an R4 that will better suit this area. With the retail areas, the recreational use, the social interaction that the RVG promotes, that's the type of customer we are trying to.
Could you develop it as a little bit of R4 and a little bit of RVG or not? I'm just asking the question.
I'm not 100% sure on that. Do you know?
Oh, yeah. You're going in for all RVG.
Yeah, we're going in for all RVG. Are you?
I'm just asking the question.
We're submitting for all RVG.
Okay.
Yeah. The overall parcel is 73.5 acres. It's an open pasture, horse pasture as it sits today. It's got the Ward Brook stream running through it towards the northern half of the parcel there. Our proposed parcel split, 23 acres will still remain pasture area, and approximately 50 acres will become residential development area there. Pulte Homes is a publicly traded company. Nationally, we have teams that put market studies together. The current zoning calls for 100-foot wide lots, which target the more affluent move-up buyer in a higher price range for the prestige and privacy of this desirable area. However, we believe Mentor is an economically vibrant city, which is attracting the new emerging home buyers. These are the new job, new opportunity home buyers that have a lot of growth and opportunity in front of them. We are seeking the rezoning for the opportunity for the city to promote this diversity and attract this emerging buyer with all the commercial development going on, the retail, like I stated earlier, and then also the RVG with the kind of the social interactions with the garden, the picnic area, the park areas.
Okay.
As I kind of stated earlier, we are back for our second discussion informally for our concept design. The concept plan up there is our original one. Mathematically, that one worked for an RVG community, but we really were off the mark. We didn't hit the elements of the RVG that we feel now that we want to hit there. So we came back in April, addressed some comments that you guys had from the original plan. We eliminated the cul-de-sac to the east. We provided a centralized green space and park area with a gazebo there to the east. We removed the detention basin in the middle of the community there and created more of a western buffer with trees and everything on the western property line. So after that, during that meeting, Jim O'Connor took your guys' notes, and we came back with the second plan revision. We've added, we've shifted the homes over there on the west side. We've added a parking to the park area for better accessibility. We've eliminated the gazebo for more of a picnic area, more of a gathering area over there. The garden area and walking path pretty much remain the same over there. It's kind of centralized over there on the west or eastern side. We removed the walking path that traveled back behind the homes, but we did keep that common space buffer area and kept the landscaping there to kind of buffer between the rear of the homes there. We've relocated the mail kiosks, I believe on the last concept plan, they were over there on the east, towards that boulevard going out on the east, and also maybe one to the south there. But we've relocated them to the central island on the north and side of the central island to try to help dictate and promote traffic, the traffic flow within the community there. We've also included in the preliminary plan the seating outlooks over the stream, kind of getting everybody out of the house, see the community walk. And then we've also created the what we deem the western easement there, just to help with the storm infrastructure and tree buffering that would be needed.
Up there?
So I think one of the questions that was asked at the previous meeting was, how are you going to service the area with a second access point?
Correct, yes, and if you'll go back to that last page there. Currently, as this concept plan is before you guys, we have the second means of egress going to the east there with the 100-foot easement currently in place right there. We are in talks with the HOA over there in Deep Woods. We are also looking at the possibility of, thank you. So that's the exit the means of egress we were just discussing there. That goes out to the east to the Deep Woods apartments, condominiums. There's an existing 100-foot easement over there. We're in talks with them. Jim O'Connor's negotiating with them at the moment. We're also looking at the potential of a second means of egress over on the west side, down towards the Steeplechase cul-de-sac, correct, right through there. Basically going between lots 63 and 64. So those are the options we are currently looking at.
Let me ask a question to the administration. You had some concern about the 100-foot easement in the staff report. Am I reading that correctly? You said,
Well, I think we indicated as a condition of the approval that we would want it to be a dedicated right-of-way.
Correct.
Is that the negotiation that's going on?
Yes, that is correct. Currently we don't own the easement that goes through Deep Woods. But I mean, that's the negotiation.
It's one wood, by the way.
Deep Wood, I'm
Deep
sorry.
Wood,
Yeah,
that's
I
okay.
apologize. Deep Wood. But yes, to meet the standards of a dedicated right-of-way means of egress, we are negotiating with Deep Wood to the east there. And then we also have enough room to the west going through Steeplechase that if need be, that could be a
I'm gonna ask the
viable option.
administration another question. If they went through Steeplechase, who needs to approve that? Is it just us?
There's two lots at the end of Chase that are vacant.
Okay.
So that would have to be, that the existing road would have to be improved,
Right.
extended.
Correct.
So that would be just us?
Council is part of the plat.
Well, I know, but, I mean, it's the administration and the city that's gonna approve it, right?
I suspect the folks on Steeplechase
May have something to say
something to
about
say
that.
about it as well.
So, is your guy talking to the Steeplechase people also?
Yes. Jim is going to begin those
So he's not
talks.
talking with them?
Not currently, but there are
currently, okay.
plans, yes.
Okay.
Those two lots, I believe, are under single ownership.
Okay.
That's correct. And those are also zoned as RVG.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, go right ahead.
That's okay, yeah.
You done?
Just one more slide. We just zoomed in on the common space. Wanted to give you guys just examples and ideas of what we were thinking about for the pavilion area, some of the amenities for the walking trail, being a water fountain, a bike rack, waste bins. And then also wanted to point out the fact that even though we've restructured the common area, we're still at 36% of the overall site is common space. And then that was all I wanted to present to you guys. I want to say thank you again for having us informally here, and Travis and I are here to answer any questions or comments you guys have before we formally
Any
submit.
questions?
What's the path made out of?
Let Travis, have we decided that?
Travis Coyne, civil engineer with Don Boney Associates. I've been part of a couple meetings with yourself and the city. I think the comment came up, you guys wanted it to be concrete or asphalt. So you have to assume, depending on what the developer wants. But
No, it's not what the developer wants, it's what we want.
concrete or asphalt will do. So.
You know, it's not his call, it's our call.
And how about a fireplace for the pavilion?
Currently in our formal plans that we are going to submit, there is a fireplace off of the pavilion. As an example.
It's a fire
I'm
pit.
sorry, fire pit.
Fireplace, right?
It's a fire pit with a patio around it.
With seating.
Pulte had done it on another one of their renderings.
Maybe we could see it.
Yeah, we'll submit it with the formal submittal. You'll see what it looks like. So.
And then a concern for the engineer, I know we've talked about this, is the drainage. Catching that water from 90 and bringing it out. Now, I know there was a survey done before, and we got negative fall heading eastbound in that creek. So if you dredge that out, that's just going to hold water. So we can't send any water eastbound at all, because that 42-inch culvert is at 700, and the box culvert at Deepwood's at 700.5. So you can't send water uphill. So you're going to have to do some more work on your stormwater.
So, the current drainage patterns, everything south of Ward Brook drains the Ward Brook. It goes east. There's sediment accumulated, and the engineers asked for us to excavate out about 2 feet of sediment that's built up on our property.
But if you excavate out 2 feet to the property line, and you can't get an excavator in Deepwood property, it's just going to hold water. It's going to hold 2 feet of water. So
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a little bit more work done to the storm part before you start digging out a trench that's going to hold water.
Yeah, we'll work through those with engineering. We do final engineering, and we've already met with engineering staff and what they're asking for as far as bypass sewers, digging out the existing trench.
Because I think I talked to you about a weir, that you could contain your own stormwater, and
Since that's,
I think that you mentioned
since
that.
that's a stream, I'm pretty confident we're not gonna be able to install any sort of weirs on that existing stream. Could be allowed to go in there and excavate out the sediment. If there would be any assistance from the city, it would be, working with the neighbor to the east and, getting them to cooperate in excavating the sediment on their property. And that can also be worked out as Pulte is right now, negotiating with the condo association. Something that can be discussed, but any help with the city would help in those discussions.
Just can't overwhelm the people on Stony Brook. You just can't overwhelm them with your water.
Yeah.
So somehow it's gonna.
There's a 48-inch sewer, storm sewer on Johnny Cave, and there's extra capacity in there. We'll have to get the exact flows from the city, but they were talking about 24-inch sewer to, if not 30, that would be a relief sewer that would, any larger storms, when that creek fills up, it would fill up, hit that storm sewer, and then get routed up to Johnny Cake, where that extra capacity in that 48-inch sewer is. So that's the reason for that 30-foot storm easement on the west part of the property. We're working with the city to bypass as much water as we can, away from Ward Brook to Johnny Cake, where that larger sewer.
Okay. And catch all that I-90 runoff in steeplechase.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you're gonna work with getting all this water to go to,
Yeah, and from the last,
84.
the last plan that was submitted versus new layout, we did shift the roads, you know, a little slightly to the east to give more room for that easement.
and keep that buffer there
Yep.
for the residents there on Poplar and Silver Beach.
So do you feel comfortable with what we've asked you to provide for the final?
Yes, our
I
next
mean,
step is we're gonna come
Not for
in.
the final, but for the.
For the formal submittal.
For the formal submittal.
Yes.
So you're gonna have to work it out between now and then on the condos. And if that doesn't work out, you're gonna have to work out something on the steeplechase aspect of things. So,
Mr. Chairman, I have a few comments.
go ahead.
You've kind of moved in the right direction in some ways with the common space and the access to it and the kind of commitment to develop that so that it's a useful space. And I appreciate we're not walking behind everybody's backyard and, you know, that's just not recreation. And I have a concern, it's a single concern really, about the whole plan, and that is that the racetrack part, the circular driveway, or a circular area, parts of Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. If you stood in the side, anywhere in the street there, all you're going to see is an ocean of garage doors. I mean, there's no relief to that street at all. It's house after house after house. Now, I know your business is to build houses, so I mean, I'm not confused by that. But I would like to see some relief inside of that, beyond what's there. I mean, and again, I'm not telling you what to do, but I looked at this and I said, you know, there's at least 6 houses here that, if they weren't there, would relieve some of this environment significantly. Houses 17, 18, 19, and 20, and 72, and I guess that's 86, right? And I'm just throwing this out. We can't really see the net plan. But if those became green spaces that were at the ends of the, you already have a little piece of green space here. But you can see what I'm talking about. Every house lines up. It's going to be an ocean, and every house is at least half a double garage door, right? That's all you're going to see. It's not, I'm just thinking it's not, you know, we approve the RVGs based on plan, not based on meeting minimal requirements. So I'm still looking for a little more quality in the plan. If these, I'm just saying, if these 4 lots went away and the 2 lots at the other end, I don't know if you can scroll over to that, and that became green space, it would take a considerable amount of density pressure and repetition, these 2 right here, 96. If this became a green space and that became a green space, it would relieve the density, all, you know, at each end at least. I mean, the main streets are still pretty much the same. It wouldn't, but it would certainly create part of the green in the space where the houses are to relieve the density. Now, I'm not saying you got to get rid of 6 houses, but I'm saying those spaces would help visually and just quality of life to not have this just be a constant garage door after garage door after garage door after garage door. You know, I mean,
We could look at reconfiguring some of those.
I'm not saying you have to get rid of 6 houses. I'm saying it would be, if you can get some relief in this area. Because right now, you stand right here, you look up the street, look down the street, all you're seeing is very closely placed fronts of houses without any real visual relief at all.
I think the curved road will actually help with that.
Well, it will help, but you're still, it's the same. It's garage, double garage door, double garage door, double garage, boom, 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 boom. And you're in a canyon. I mean, there's no relief to it. If there was some relief down here, if there was some relief down, I mean, you got a little bit of relief. You got a little bit of it. I'm just saying more, so that this would really relieve that density at both ends. That's my comment. I mean, that's I'm looking for. I'm not saying you're not hitting the minimal requirements for RVG. I'm saying I'd like to see the plan be a little better relative to that kind of amenity internal, not just some open space at the other end, but something that takes the pressure of the density off in this area. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll see you later. Right. Okay.
Thank you guys for your comments.
Okay.
Thanks for staying.
Anything else? Director's report?
So I would just like to say that the Design Awards, we really did enjoy the project. It was a good, we'd like to continue doing that. I would like to give a special thank you to Kayla, our planner, because this was her project, and she put a lot of time and energy into it. So, and it is her birthday tonight, and this is where she spent it, so.
Well, that's just sad.
It is, isn't it? So,
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
that's it.
Thanks for all your hard work on that. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
We're having too much fun. Why would we want to? Motion to adjourn.
Jeez.